Hello there, I'm Kios Ronin B Maker, and welcome to Lounge Ronin, all things, everything. If you're new to the channel, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And on this episode, we're going to discuss the origins of the fairies, Part 1. Now, with all things Lounge Ronin, I highly implore you, if this scratches that itch, to please do your own research, as you might be surprised as to what you discover about the world and yourself. So without further ado, let's get into it. Now, this article was updated February 4th, 2022 by Rushton. The origins of the fairies, encoded in our cultures. Part 1. When fairies appear in folklore from all over the world as metaphysical beings who, given the right conditions, are able to interact with the physical world, they're known by many names, but there is a conformity to what they represent, and perhaps also to their origins. From the Huldufolk in Iceland to the Tuatha De Danann in Ireland, and the Manato of Native Americans, these are apparently intelligent entities that live unseen besides us, until their occasional manifestations in this world become encoded into our cultures through folk tales, anecdotes, and testimonies. In his 1691 Treatise of the Fairies of Amberfoyle, Scotland, the Reverend Robert Kirk suggested they represent a secret commonwealth living in a parallel reality to ours, with a civilization and morals of their own, only visible to seers and clairvoyants. His assessment fits well with both folklore motifs and some modern theories about their ancient origins, and they have permeated the collective human consciousness. So, who are the fairies? Where do they come from? And what do they want? Now, this idea of living in a parallel reality, to think about the fact that a reverend was bringing up this idea in 1691, tells you that these fundamental ideas are nothing new and have been spoken about for clearly a long time. And this idea of them living in a parallel reality, I've always made the speculation, and it kind of reminds me of the of Ron Perlman's Hellboy 2 and the Golden Army, where they go to Troll Town, and you need those special glasses in order to see the symbolisms and in order to be able to identify these fairy creatures. And I think that's really interesting because of this whole idea of pocket realities, pocket dimensions. You see it a lot in whether it's tabletop games, science fiction and science fiction fantasy novels and TV shows. It's this really interesting idea. Even in the animated show Hilda on Netflix, there are these little elves, and they start harassing the main character, and then she ends up finding out that her home is built literally in the middle of this elf city, and they're like tiny little elf people, and she can't see them because she hasn't filled out the proper paperwork and registrations to be allowed to see them. And then once she's filled all that paperwork out, she's then able to see this entire civilization. And she then realizes that every now and then she's been walking through these people's houses, things of that nature. It's really funny, very cute show. But the reason why I'm bringing up these ideas is because of what they represent in terms of our fundamental understanding of reality and these concepts. But let's continue. I don't want to get too off track with the Ronin rant. Fairy tales. Quote, myth is a story that implies a certain way of interpreting consensus reality so to derive meaning and effective charge from its images and interactions. As such, it can take many forms: fables, religion, and folklore, but also formal philosophical systems and scientific theories. End quote. And that actually, attests to what I was saying earlier. Like, these ideas of parallel realities, like, they may be speaking about some of these concepts and um, creatures in a fable or folklore sense. But then what happens when there is archaeological evidence to corroborate and to affirm such fables and folklore? Look at the discovery of the portion of the Wall of Troy, and how we were all convinced that the Iliad was just a folklore, a fable, a mythological story, that Troy did not actually exist. And then Greek archaeologists discover a portion of the Wall of Troy. So, as we move forward, I want you guys to keep in mind of this quote from Star Wars, and it goes, "There's always a bit of truth in legends." Let's continue. Now, that quote above was by Bernard Kastrup, More Than Allegory on Religious Myth, Truth, and Belief. Fairy tales are a type of mythology, explanations of human and environmental phenomena, usually set at an intermediate time in the past. Most fairy tales are never one-offs, but seem to cluster as a single form from many sources, which are dispersed geographically and chronologically. In Europe and America, they are mostly collected by folklorists in the 19th and early 20th centuries, from both oral and written sources, and then disseminated from there. Many were incorporated into the folklorist Bible, the Arain Thompson catalogs of folktale types and motives, which were first put together in 1910 by the Finnish folklorist Anita Arne and completed by Sith Thompson in 1958. They consist of several doorstop volumes which index every conceivable story type and motif from around the world. It's been suggested that the catalogs actually codify every human experience, distilled into story, an index of our collective memory as a species realized through the medium of mythology. Amidst the catalogs are the story types classed as fairy tales, each containing hundreds of separate motifs. They are the descriptions of a vast array of myth. These are not simple tales told to pass the long winter nights, although that was always one of the use for them, but rather they are sophisticated tools that can be used to interpret human experience and to help understand the reality we find ourselves in. One common fairy tale motif, for instance, is the suspension of time when mortal visits fairyland. A nice example is the Irish story of Oisin, a poet of the Feen. After falling asleep under an ash tree, he awakens to find Nima, the shape-shifting queen of Tir Naog, the land of the perpetual youth, summoning him to join her in realm as her husband. He agrees and finds himself living in a paradise of perpetual summer, where all good things abound and where time and death hold no sway. But soon he breaks the taboo of standing on a broad, flat stone, from where he is able to view the Ireland he left behind. It has changed for the worse, and he begs Nima to give him leave to return. She reluctantly agrees, but asks him if he return after only one day with the mortals. She supplies him with a black horse, which he is not to dismount, and gifted him with wisdom and knowledge for surpassing that of men. Once back in Ireland, he realizes that decades have passed, and that he is no longer recognized or known of. Inevitably, he dismounts his horse, and immediately his youth is gone, and becomes an enfeebled old man with nothing but his immortal wisdom. There is no returning to the fairyland of the Ti Na Nog. In other variations of the story, the hero turns to dust as soon as his feet touch the ground of consensus reality. This important and widespread folktale motif seems to suggest that fairyland is the world of the dead, immune with the passage of time, and the return to the world of the living is not possible as the mortal body has aged and decayed in line with the physical laws of the world. In the Japanese tale of Urashima Taro, the hero, when returning home, is even given a casket by his fairy bride, in which his years are locked. When he opens it, his time is up. These stories articulate a belief in the other world that is never heaven, but is apparently ruled over by a race of immortals who can extort control over the consciousness of an individual, who may believe themselves to still be in human form, but are actually already dead and existing in a non-material form. It is ultimately the place where the fairies come from, a place untouched by the passage of time and physical death. It could even represent the collective consciousness of humanity into an understandable form in stories, immortal in nature and containing all the wisdom and knowledge as suggested in the Ocean tale. Interesting. I would have never thought of correlating such stories to death and life. But it's an interesting idea. And this is kind of what's funny about the human consciousness and our perception of reality. And these many stories of people, mortals, individuals stepping into these pocket realms, into these, dimensions where time is different or time is at a standstill. And then they return to the outside world, and either, hundreds of years have passed or thousands. And it makes you kind of wonder, like, you know, how much of our conscious experience or how much of our lived experience is really all just a perception within our own minds. And even so, when it comes to such fantastical creatures, why is it that we tend to pretend as if it's nothing more than myth and fable when the Smithsonian has an entire department dedicated to collecting the remains and artifacts of giants? If you're someone of a religious faith and you believe in giants, you believe in God and that He created this world, is it out of the realm of possibility for you to believe in the potentiality of fairies, of trolls? Is it out of the potentiality to believe it? Especially when we have these various eyewitness accounts and anecdotal evidence. How much of our reality is being warped and meshed with others? How much of our hidden history and past civilizations are we not privy to? What type of cultures and humans and humanoids have lived? I have a presentation that I did on the very same topic. But these are things to just keep into mind when we do our own research into the hidden world. The hidden world, the hidden history, the true history. But let's continue. Enough of a Ronin rant. This might be explained by seeing folk tales as representing a surviving pagan belief system of the afterlife. This afterlife did not follow the strictures of Christianity or otherworld religions and provided an alternative view of what happens to consciousness after death. Is a view that was in the West superseded by Christian theology, but that may be surfacing in these folk tales as remnants of the previous system of belief, a belief system that remained partially intact but opted underground for fear of religious persecution. The presence of fairies in this underworld and the ability to materialize in standard reality suggests that they are an essential element in pagan ideas about consciousness and that they had a role to play when it came to death. In this theory, the characters in the story play the part of messengers, telling us about the true nature of a timeless reality that is distinct and separate from conscious reality, and showing us that human consciousness disassociates from the physical body to exist in a parallel reality, such as Tir Naag, where the fairies are in charge. This message is encoded in the stories. Real fairies and shaman spirits. However, it's not possible to reduce the origin of the fairies only to abstract mythological themes. Their appearance in folklore often takes the form of witness testimonies and anecdotes continuing to present day. They take a myriad of different forms: leprechauns, simps, brownies, pixels, even aliens in a technological updated version of their form. But they are portrayed as real entities, making appearances in this world from their own. And this is another really interesting idea. The possibility that they are, I wouldn't even say shape shifting themselves, but they are physically shaping our conscious perception of them in our reality. And I say that in the sense that perhaps in our world, in our plane of reality, we would not be able to comprehend their true physical appearance, as it probably goes against our laws of reality. So, in order to combat this issue, they are able to consciously perceive their appearance within the laws of our reality that allows us to be able to digest them physically for our perception, if that makes sense. It reminds me of I wish I could think of the film. I think what was it, Signal, with Jodie Foster? When spoiler alert, she, eventually meets this entity from a different reality, and it was communicating, and it appears to her as her father. And if I remember correctly, it appears to her as her father because that was the only way that she would be able to perceive them within this plane of existence that they were in. I don't think they were in their reality. I don't remember specifics, but I remember that part, that he was like, this is the only way that you would be able to actually comprehend and perceive me. My form is beyond your capabilities of understanding. It was something like that. But the reason why I bring that up is that this is something in a theme that you'll hear a lot of, that they appear in this type of form because you could not comprehend our true form, or we are beyond the physical realm. We are now just a conscious energy. These are just interesting concepts and ideas to think about in your own reflections and studies. But let's continue. They lure people into their magical dancing rings, abduct children and adults, play tricks on the unwary process in fairy funeral corteges, and generally disport themselves with a sense of mischievous and sometimes malevolent immorality. There are countless depictions of these metaphysical presence in our world throughout time, playing a part in human culture, always liminal, but constantly present as far back as folklore stretches. And there you have it. Part 1 of the Origins of Fairies. And as I was saying, we have to really take into consideration what this means for our own perception of reality. Are these encounters only just encounters of our minds playing tricks on us? Or is there more to this plane of existence that we have yet been able to tap into, that perhaps our past civilizations were able to? They call them ley lines for a reason. These ideas of stargates, these ideas of giants, of little people, whatever it may be, these fantastical creatures. They keep on telling us that it is mythology, that it's folklore. But as the world continues to unveil, the folklore and the mythology become truth. They become historical sites. They become religious sites. We have yet to been able to tap into the many avenues of what it means to be human. And I feel that these stories and these encounters only further confirm that we are being misled and denied the truth of our reality, the truth of our potentiality, and the truth of what it means to be human. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Lounge Ronin. All things, everything. If you've made it this far, please make sure to hit that like button, subscribe, and ring that notification bell. And until next time, stay positive, stay focused, stay true, and much love.